The city of Zara glowed under two moons. Tall towers touched the clouds, their glass skin shining with strange lights. Airships moved slowly in the sky, leaving behind silver trails. In one of the small rooms at the edge of this huge city, a single alien mother sat in silence. Her name was Lyra, and tonight her heart felt heavier than ever. Her daughter, a small child named Alari, was sitting on the floor. Her hands were holding a toy, but the toy was broken. It was not an ordinary toy. It was made of crystal and metal, glowing faintly with blue light. Now the light was gone, and only small cracks remained across its surface. Ilari's big eyes filled with tears. Her small hands shook as she tried to fit the broken parts back together. "Mom, it is not working," she whispered, her voice trembling. The words cut Lyra deeper than any knife. She reached forward, trying to help, but her own hands failed her. The pieces slipped from her fingers and fell with a dull sound on the metal floor. Alari began to cry. Her soft sobs echoed in the small room. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She pulled her daughter close, wrapping her in her long arms. Her alien skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight coming through the window. But the shimmer was broken by the wet trails of her own tears. The toy was not just a toy. It was a memory, a treasure, a symbol of love. It had belonged to Alari's father, who was no longer alive. He had built it with his own hands before leaving on his last journey. When he did not return, the toy became the only piece of him that remained. To Alari, it was her father's voice, his smile, his love, all inside that glowing crystal. And now it was broken. Lyra's heart screamed inside. She tried again and again to press the broken parts together. Her fingers shook. Her tears blurred. Her vision. The toy refused to shine. The silence between mother and daughter grew heavy. The city outside was alive with neon colors, but inside this small home, there was only sadness. Alari wiped her eyes and looked up at her mother. "Can't you fix it, Mama? Please." Her voice was soft, begging. Lyra's lips opened, but no words came out. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise her daughter that everything would be fine. But the truth was harder. The circuits inside the toy were too complex, too old. She did not know how to repair them. Her own tears fell faster. "I am sorry, Alari, I cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking. The child pressed her face against her mother's chest, both of them shaking, both of them broken in that moment. Outside, the winds howled softly through the narrow alleys. The neon signs flickered in the distance. Other families laughed, other homes shined with light. But in this home, the weight of sorrow was too heavy. The toy lay on the floor, silent, dead. And with it, the little girl's smile faded away. Lyra remembered the day her husband had built the toy. He had sat with little Alari on his lap, shaping the glowing crystal. He had laughed when she clapped her tiny hands. "This is for you, my star," he had said. His voice was deep, full of warmth. Now that voice was only a memory. Every time the toy glowed, it felt like he was still near. Now that glow was gone. It was like losing him a second time. The mother held her daughter tighter. She closed her eyes, wishing for a miracle. Her heart was screaming, "If only someone could help us. If only someone could fix this." But she was alone. In this huge city full of strangers, she was just one alien mother with no family, no friends, no one to turn to. Her daughter's sobs grew softer, but they did not stop. She had cried herself, tired. Her small fingers still clutched the broken toy even as her head rested on her mother's chest. Lyra looked at the toy again, lying half-broken in her daughter's hands. She touched it gently, her tears falling on its cold surface. The cracks reflected her sorrow like a mirror. She whispered to herself, "I promised to protect her happiness, and I have failed." The minutes passed slowly. Every second felt like an hour. The weight of silence pressed on the room. The mother's sobs mixed with the faint hum of the city outside. The two moons continued to shine above the city of Zara, but inside the room it felt like endless night, and so the story began. with a mother's tears, a daughter's broken heart, and a toy that held more than anyone could imagine. But neither of them knew that fate was about to send help in the most unexpected form. The night was quiet inside the small room. Ilari had fallen asleep at last, her small body curled up in her mother's arms. The broken toy still rested beside her, its crystal surface dull and cracked. Lyra sat awake, staring at the toy as if her eyes could bring back its light. She remembered the first time she saw it, many years ago. Her husband Cale had come home with strange crystals in his hands. He was not only her partner but also a dreamer, an inventor who loved to build small wonders. On that night he worked until dawn, shaping metal with care, fitting the crystal into the frame. The next morning he placed the toy in Ilari's tiny hands. It glowed with soft blue light and sang a gentle hum. Ilari laughed with pure joy, her eyes shining brighter than the toy itself. That toy was not simple. It carried a secret, a memory, a part of Cale himself. Lyra had asked him once. "Why does it glow like that, Cale?" "It feels alive," Cale had smiled, brushing dust from his fingers. "Because it carries a memory of me," he said softly. At the time, Lyra thought it was only words of love. But after he never returned from his last voyage, she began to believe he had spoken the truth. Every time Ilari touched the toy, it seemed to answer her. It hummed, it flickered with light, almost as if it knew her feelings. When she was sad, the glow became gentle. When she laughed, the light sparkled brighter. It was as if a piece of Cale's soul lived inside, watching over their child. That is why its silence now was unbearable. Without the glow, it felt as if Cale had finally vanished from their lives. Lyra picked up the toy carefully. Her fingers traced the cracks on its crystal heart. She whispered, "What did you put inside here, Cale? What secret did you hide?" The toy gave no answer, only a cold surface. Her chest ached with the weight of loss. She thought of Ilari's tears and her own helplessness. The toy was not just broken, it was like a bridge destroyed between the past and the present. The city outside was still alive. Machines moved, lights flickered, ships passed across the twin moons. But inside, only the small hum of an old heater kept the silence away. Lyra sat thinking. She knew that alien engineers in the city could not fix this toy. They had looked at it before when it had flickered weakly months ago. Their words were cold. Old tech, strange mix of crystal and metal, better to throw it away. But Lyra could never throw it away. It was her daughter's heart, her husband's memory, her only anchor in this world. The toy itself was unique. It was shaped like a small sphere with thin metal rings around it. When working, the rings spun slowly, creating soft music and glowing patterns. Children in the neighborhood used to stare with wide eyes. Some parents even asked where they could buy one. But Lyra always said the same thing. It is one of a kind, because it truly was. There was no other toy like it in the universe. Ilari, still asleep, turned slightly and murmured in her dreams. Her small hand reached out for the toy even in sleep. The sight broke Lyra's heart again. She placed the broken sphere gently into her daughter's hand. The child's fingers closed around it as if refusing to let go. Tears filled Lyra's eyes once more. She whispered, "I will find a way, my star. I promise you." The night passed slowly. When dawn came, the city began to roar again. Voices, engines, footsteps filled the streets outside. But in this home, sorrow still sat like a shadow. Ilari woke up, her face pale from the tears of last night. She looked at the toy and her lips trembled again. "Is it still broken, Mama?" she asked softly. Lyra could only nod, unable to lie. The little girl hugged it to her chest, her eyes dull. It was more than a broken toy. It was a broken heart. Lyra stood up and walked to the small window. She looked out at the shining towers and thought, there must be someone somewhere who can understand this, who can repair what others cannot. But she also knew the truth. Most aliens in this city had no patience for broken things. They always replaced, never repaired. To them, a broken toy was nothing, but to her it was everything. She sat again and pulled her daughter close. She began to tell Ilari stories about her father, stories of his laughter, his bravery, his strange habit of singing while fixing machines. Ilari listened quietly, her fingers stroking the cracks on the toy. Lyra thought maybe, just maybe, the stories would heal her. But deep inside, she knew it was not enough. Only the toy could fill that empty space. And the toy was silent. The day went on, hours passed, and hope slipped further away. The toy remained lifeless, and the mother remained helpless, but fate was already turning. Far away in the city, someone else was working in a dusty little workshop, a human mechanic unknown to them yet, and soon their paths would cross in a way that would change everything. The city of Zara was alive with its usual rhythm. Ships landed and lifted off. Merchants shouted their prices. Neon signs flickered in every color. Among the crowds of aliens, one figure looked different. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his skin was not shimmering blue or scaled green like the others. He was human, and his name was Daniel. Daniel had been in Zara for only a few months. He worked as a mechanic in the lower districts, far from the shining towers of the elite. His workshop was small, filled with old tools, wires, and scraps of metal. Most aliens ignored him. Some laughed at him, calling humans primitive tinkerers. But slowly, whispers began to spread. When machines failed, when engines refused to start, when even skilled alien engineers gave up, Daniel sometimes managed to repair them with his own hands. He did not have advanced scanners or glowing alien devices. He only had patience, simple tools, and a strange way of looking at problems. While others gave up, he kept trying, testing, listening to the smallest sounds. It was not magic, but it felt like it. Aliens began to wonder, how can a human fix what we cannot? Daniel never bragged, he only smiled and said, every machine has a soul, you just need to listen. That same morning, while Lyra and Ilari were still in sorrow, Daniel was finishing a repair in his workshop. A merchant's hover cart had stopped working, its engine silent. 3 alien engineers had already failed to restart it. Daniel crouched under the cart, covered in grease. He tapped the engine with a small hammer, adjusted a wire, then used his ear to listen to the vibration. Minutes later, the engine roared to life. The merchant's jaw dropped. Impossible, you fixed it? Daniel wiped his hands with a rag and gave a small shrug. Not impossible. Just needed care, he said quietly. Word of his skill traveled faster than the merchant's cart. It reached streets, shops, and even the ears of those who rarely trusted humans. But in one quiet corner of the city, it reached Lyra too. A neighbor whispered to her, there is a human, a mechanic, who can fix almost anything. Lyra's heart skipped. For a moment, hope flickered. Could he fix Ilari's toy? At first, she hesitated. Many aliens believed humans were clumsy, too simple for complex technology. What if he made it worse? But then she looked at her daughter, sitting on the floor with dull eyes. Holding the broken toy as if it was her last piece of happiness, Lyra could not watch her suffer anymore. She whispered, maybe this human can help us. Later that evening, Lyra walked through the narrow streets of the lower district. Ilari held her hand tightly, carrying the toy close to her chest. They passed shops glowing with strange lights, food stalls steaming with alien spices, and shadows of machines humming softly. Finally, they stopped in front of a small building with a rusty sign. It read in simple letters, Repairs, Daniel. Through the open door they saw him. The human was bent over a machine, his hands steady, his face focused. Ilari tugged at her mother's arm, her voice soft. Mama, is that him? Lyra nodded slowly, her chest tight with both fear and hope. Daniel heard the sound of their footsteps and looked up. His brown eyes met theirs, curious but gentle. He wiped his hands and stepped forward. Can I help you? He asked, his voice calm. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then held out the toy. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. This is not an ordinary toy. It is very old, very important. Can you try to fix it? Daniel looked at the strange object in her hands. The cracked crystal, the broken rings, the the faint traces of circuits that looked nothing like human machines. He raised his eyebrows. "This is different," he murmured, turning it slowly in his hands. Ilari's eyes followed every movement, her face full of silent hope. Daniel looked back at Lyra. "I can try," he said. "But I cannot promise." Those words were simple, yet they carried weight. Because unlike the alien engineers who dismissed it, Daniel did not say it was impossible. He was willing to try. Ilari stepped closer, her small voice breaking the silence. "Please. It is the only thing I have left from my father." Her words pierced Daniel's heart like a blade. He looked at the child, then at the mother, and then at the toy again. In that moment, it was no longer just a repair job. It was a promise, a chance to give back light to two broken hearts. The air inside the workshop grew heavy with silence. Outside, the city continued to roar, but here, time seemed to pause. Daniel placed the toy carefully on his work table. His tools lay scattered, his hands ready. The journey of fixing the impossible had just begun. And for the first time in days, hope returned to the eyes of the alien mother. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Maybe, just maybe, there is still a chance." The toy rested on Daniel's work table. Its crystal heart was cracked. Its thin metal rings bent out of shape. Strange glowing lines ran across it like veins, but now they were dark and silent. Lyra and Ilari stood nearby, watching every movement with wide eyes. Daniel leaned closer, studying it carefully. He had never seen anything like it before. Not in books, not in machines, not even in the broken ship parts he had repaired since coming to Zira. Still, something about it drew him in. It felt alive, even though it was broken. "This is delicate," he muttered softly. He reached for a small magnifying lens and adjusted it over his eye. His fingers traced the edges of the cracked crystal. The structure was both fragile and strong, as if it carried something more than energy. Ilari's small voice broke the silence. "Can you fix it? Please?" Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, he did not smile. He only nodded once, slow and steady. He opened his old toolbox. Inside were human tools, simple compared to the shining alien equipment used in the city. A soldering iron, wires, pliers, tiny brushes. A hammer that looked older than him. Lyra frowned, doubt filling her eyes. "How can you fix something alien with tools like that?" she asked. Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and answered calmly. "Machines don't care where the tools come from. They only care about hands that listen." He began by gently bending the broken rings back into shape. The metal was strange, lighter than any steel he knew, but strong as bone. It resisted his touch at first, then slowly gave way as he worked patiently. He hummed softly, a human habit he always had while fixing. Ilari tilted her head, surprised by the sound. Her father used to hum too. A memory flashed in her eyes. Her small lips curved into the faintest smile, but the true challenge lay inside the toy. When Daniel carefully opened a thin seam, the heart of the toy revealed itself. It was a cluster of tiny circuits woven with glowing crystal threads. The design was unlike anything human or alien. It looked less like a machine and more like art. Lyra gasped. "I never saw this before." Daniel leaned closer, his eyes sharp. "Your husband built this?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly, her voice soft. "Yes, Kale made it for our daughter." Daniel touched the edge carefully, almost reverently. "He must have been more than just a builder," he whispered. Hours passed as Daniel worked. The workshop filled with the sound of small clicks, the spark of wires, the hum of his iron. Sweat covered his forehead, grease smeared his hands. Sometimes he stopped, listening, as if waiting for the toy to speak. At times, the crystal flickered faintly. Like a dying ember, Ilari gasped with every flicker, her hope rising, then falling again when the light faded. Daniel frowned deeply. "This is not just technology," he murmured. "It feels like memory locked inside crystal." He tried connecting wires, brushing dust, cleaning circuits. Each time the toy pulsed faintly, but then went silent again. The silence was heavy, pressing against all three of them. Lyra's doubt grew stronger. Maybe she had made a mistake bringing him here. Maybe the toy was too far gone. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "If even you cannot fix it, then no one can." Daniel looked up, his eyes steady. "I did not say I cannot," he replied firmly. "I only said it will not be easy." He pulled out a different tool, not alien, not advanced, just a small tuning fork. He struck it lightly and held it near the crystal. A faint hum answered, so soft it was almost silence. Daniel's eyes lit up. "There it is," he whispered. "What is it?" Lyra asked quickly. Daniel leaned back, smiling faintly. "It's not dead, it's only sleeping." Hilary's eyes widened. Her small hands clutched the edge of the table. "Can you wake it up?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, but I will need time." He continued working late into the night. The rings spun slightly. The circuits glowed faintly, but never for long. Each time the toy tried to shine, it grew weaker again. Daniel refused to give up. He pressed wires, adjusted screws, listened to every vibration. Lyra watched in silence, torn between hope and fear. Her heart wanted to believe, but her mind whispered that no one could bring back what was lost. Finally, after hours, Daniel leaned back with a sigh. The toy still lay silent, its light gone. Ilari's lips quivered. Tears filled her eyes again. "Is it broken forever?" she whispered. Daniel wiped his hands and looked at her gently. "No," he said firmly. "This is not the end. This is only the beginning of the real challenge." He stood and stretched, his muscles stiff from hours of work. Then he turned to Lyra. "I will not give up on this," he said, his voice steady. "But this toy holds something more than circuits and wires. It holds a piece of your husband. I need to understand it fully before I can fix it." Lyra looked at him, her tears shimmering in the dim light. Her heart whispered something she had not felt in years. "Trust." She nodded slowly. "Then we will wait." Daniel gave a small smile. "Good," he said. He placed the toy carefully back on the table, covering it with a cloth as if tucking it to rest. Outside, the city lights burned bright against the night sky. Inside the workshop, 3 hearts beat with quiet hope. The challenge had begun, and Daniel knew deep inside that he was facing more than a broken toy. He was facing a mystery that could change everything. The workshop was quiet. The broken toy still rested under a cloth on the table. Daniel sat in his chair, staring at it as if it were alive. Lyra and Ilari waited nearby, their eyes tired but hopeful. He had worked all night, but the toy remained silent. It had flickered once or twice, but never stayed alive. Most engineers would have given up. But Daniel was different. For him, machines were not just metal and wires. They were puzzles, stories, secrets waiting to be heard. He leaned forward and removed the cloth. The toy looked fragile under the lamp. The cracks on the crystal seemed deeper, the rings bent and weary. But Daniel smiled faintly. "All right," he whispered. "Let's try again." This time, he did not reach for scanners or alien devices. He pulled out a set of simple human tools, a small screwdriver, a tuning fork, a thin copper wire, and even an old magnifying glass. Lyra frowned, her arms crossed. "You cannot fix alien crystal with scraps," she said softly, doubt in her voice. Daniel chuckled, not looking up. "Scraps are only scraps if you don't know their value," he replied. "Sometimes the simplest tool is the most powerful." He began by wrapping the copper wire around one of the broken rings. Every movement was steady, patient. Ilari stepped closer, watching with wide eyes. "Why are you using that wire?" she asked. Daniel glanced at her, his voice gentle. "Because this metal ring has lost its path, the wire will guide it again." Ilari tilted her head, not fully understanding. but her small lips curved in a hopeful smile. Slowly, he tapped the crystal with the tuning fork. The sound echoed faintly. At first it was empty, hollow. Then, after another tap, a soft hum answered. Daniel's eyes brightened. "There you are," he whispered. Lyra leaned forward, confused. "What did you hear?" she asked. Daniel smiled slightly. "Your husband built this like music. The crystal responds to vibration, not just energy." Lyra's eyes widened, her breath catching. Music, her husband Cale always hummed when building. Could it be true? Daniel continued. He whistled softly, a simple human tune. The crystal flickered faintly. Ilari gasped, her little hands clutching the table. "It moved," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yes, it is listening." He worked for hours, adjusting. Wires, tapping rhythms, humming softly. Every time he touched the toy, it responded a little more. The crystal's glow returned in tiny sparks. The rings began to shift slowly, grinding at first, then smoother. The toy was waking, but it was fragile. Each time the light grew brighter, it also threatened to break apart. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "It needs balance," he muttered. "Too much force and it will shatter. Too little and it will sleep again." His hands moved carefully, combining human tricks with alien design. He tightened screws not by measure, but by feel. He hummed when he worked, letting sound guide him. He trusted instincts that no alien machine could calculate. At one point, the crystal glowed brighter than ever before. The whole room filled with soft blue light. Ilari cried out in joy, "It's alive!" But then, just as quickly, the glow began to fade. Daniel pressed his palm against the toy gently, whispering, "Stay with me. Don't fade." The light steadied, flickered, then held. It was faint, but it was steady. Lyra covered her mouth. With her hand, tears filling her eyes, she whispered, "You did it." Daniel shook his head. "Not yet," he said firmly. "This is only the first step." He leaned closer, adjusting the final wire. His fingers moved like a pianist playing a song only he could hear. The rings spun once, slowly. The hum grew deeper, stronger. The cracks on the crystal glowed faintly. As if healing from within, the toy's soft music filled the air. It was not loud, but it was alive. Ilari reached forward, her eyes wide. "Can I touch it?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. She placed her small hands on the glowing sphere. At once, the light grew brighter. The toy responded to her touch. Her face lit up with joy. Her laughter filled the room. It was the first true laugh since the toy had broken. Lyra's tears fell freely. Her voice trembled. It knows her. It remembers her." Daniel leaned back, exhausted but smiling. "Yes," he said softly. "Because it was built with love. Not just skill, and love remembers." The toy was not fully repaired. The cracks were still there. The glow still fragile, but it was alive, and in that moment it was enough. Other aliens who passed by the workshop peeked inside. Their eyes widened as they saw the toy glowing in the hands of the little girl. They whispered among themselves. How did the human do that? No one else could fix it. Impossible. Daniel ignored them. His eyes were on Ilari, who hugged the toy against her chest, her smile brighter than the crystal itself. Lyra wiped her tears, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." Daniel only nodded. "This is not finished," he said. "I can make it stronger, but it will take more time." The mother and daughter looked at him with gratitude and trust. For the first time in years, they felt hope. The toy was alive again. Not perfect, not complete, but alive. And it was because of one human mechanic. One man with simple tools, steady hands, and endless patience. The challenge was not over, but the impossible had already begun to turn into possible. And in that moment, the legend of human ingenuity quietly grew. The toy glowed softly in Ilari's hands. Its faint hum filled the workshop like a lullaby. She held it close to her chest, her small fingers trembling, Her eyes sparkled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. Lyra stood behind her daughter, her lips trembling, her eyes wide. For so long she had feared this moment would never come. For so long she had felt helpless now. Seeing her little girl smile again, her heart beat with new warmth, she whispered, "It is alive. It remembers you." Daniel sat back in his chair, exhausted but calm. Grease stained his clothes, his hands ached from hours of work, but when he saw the girl's smile, he forgot the pain. He only felt the quiet pride of someone who had given hope back to a broken heart. Hilary lifted the toy higher. The crystal glow brushed against her face, lighting her eyes. She giggled, a soft laugh that filled the silent room. The rings of the toy spun gently, creating small patterns of light across the walls. It was as if stars had entered the workshop, tiny constellations dancing just for her. "Papa," Hilary whispered suddenly, her voice soft but sure. Both Lyra and Daniel froze. The child pressed the glowing sphere to her cheek. "It feels like Papa is here," she said, smiling through her tears. Lyra covered her mouth, unable to speak. Her tears ran freely, but they were no longer heavy with grief. They were tears of release, of love, of relief. Daniel looked at them quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not speak. He only watched, realizing that this was not just about fixing a toy. It was about mending hearts. The bond between mother and child had been scarred by loss. Now, through this small act, it was healing. Lyra knelt beside her daughter, wrapping her in her arms. Her voice trembled. "He is gone, but his love is still here, and this toy carries it." Hilary nodded, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder. The glow of the toy wrapped around both of them. For the first time in years, the room was not filled with silence or sorrow. It was filled with warmth. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. "The crystal holds more than circuits. It holds memory, maybe even feelings." Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining. "You mean it is alive?" she asked softly. Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not alive like us, but alive in the way it remembers what was given to it." Lyra nodded, tears running down her cheeks. Her husband's love, his laughter, his presence, all locked inside the toy and now unlocked again. Hilary held the toy tightly. Its hum matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Human." Her voice was small, but her gratitude filled the room. Daniel smiled faintly, scratching the back of his neck. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "But I do," Hilary replied quickly, her eyes bright. "Because you gave me back my father." Lyra reached for Daniel's hand. Her long fingers brushed against his rough, grease-stained ones. "Thank you," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the tears. "You gave back," her smile, "and you gave back my hope." Daniel lowered his eyes, embarrassed by the weight of their gratitude. He only murmured, "I only fixed what was broken." But deep inside, he knew it was more than that. He had given them something no alien engineer had cared to give. Not just skill, but patience. Not just knowledge, but heart. The bond between them grew stronger in that quiet moment, not of blood, not of race, but of shared love and trust. The alien mother and her daughter looked at the human mechanic not as a stranger anymore, but as someone who had stepped into their sorrow and carried some of it away. Outside, the city of Zara bustled with noise. Merchants argued, ships roared, machines hummed, but inside the workshop there was only peace. The glow of the toy lit the room like a candle against the darkness. The mother, the daughter, and the human sat together in silence. A silence that was no longer empty, but full as the hours passed. Hilary finally grew tired, still holding the toy. As she curled up on her mother's lap, her eyes closing slowly. The hum of the toy continued like a soft lullaby. Lyra stroked her daughter's hair, her own tears still shining. Daniel watched quietly, his chest heavy with emotions he could not name. When Hilary finally fell asleep, the toy glowing gently in her hands, Lyra looked at Daniel and whispered, She has not slept this peacefully in years. Daniel nodded, his eyes soft. That is because she feels safe now, he said simply. Lyra studied him in the dim light. She saw the weariness in his eyes, the dirt on his clothes, the scars on his hands. But she also saw something else. Kindness, patience, and strength that was not loud but steady, she thought to herself. Perhaps this human was not here by accident. Perhaps fate had brought him to their door. The bond was sealed that night, between mother, daughter, and the stranger, who had mended more than crystal. It was a bond born of sorrow but transformed into hope, and it was only the beginning of something far greater. Morning arrived over the city of Zira. Twin moons faded into the bright light of the sun. Shadows stretched across the towers and markets. The city woke to its usual rhythm. But inside Daniel's small workshop, something had changed. Ilari woke first, the glowing toy still in her arms. Its hum was steady now, soft but constant. Her eyes blinked open, and a wide smile spread across her face. She whispered, "Mama, it is still alive." Lyra bent down, kissing her forehead, her tears replaced with warmth. "Yes, my star, it is alive." Daniel was already awake, cleaning his tools quietly. He looked over his shoulder at the little girl's smile. For him, that was the only reward he needed. Machines could be fixed, but giving back joy, that was something else entirely. Word had spread through the district overnight. Whispers carried faster than the glow of neon signs. The human had fixed the impossible. The human had done what alien engineers declared hopeless. By mid-morning, curious neighbors gathered outside the workshop. Some pressed their faces against the glass. Others stepped inside hesitantly. Their eyes widened as they saw the glowing toy in the hands of the child. "It is true," one alien murmured. "He fixed it." Another whispered in awe. Many had doubted humans, calling them weak, clumsy, and simple. But now they stood in silence, staring at the proof of something they could not explain. Daniel ignored the crowd. His focus remained on Lyra and Ilari. He knelt beside the little girl, his voice soft. "It is working, but it will need care. Remember, do not drop it again and always listen to its hum." Ilari nodded quickly, her small hands clutching it carefully. "I will take care of it," she promised. Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm but full of emotion. "Daniel, you have given us more than repair," she said. "You gave back." Her smile. "You gave back a piece of her father. You gave back hope to both of us." Daniel shook his head, embarrassed by the weight of her words. "I only listened," he replied. "But no one else listened," Lyra answered, her voice rising. "With truth, that is what makes you different." The crowd outside murmured again. They were not only watching a human mechanic, they were watching a story unfold before their eyes. A human had succeeded where their own kind had failed, and not with advanced tools or great power, but with patience, creativity, and heart. Ilari lifted the toy high. Its glow filled the workshop, casting soft blue light across every face. Her small voice rang out clearly. "He fixed Papa's toy." The simple words struck deeper than any speech. The crowd fell silent, their eyes shining with quiet respect. Lyra looked at her daughter and then at Daniel. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "From now on, you are not only the human mechanic," she said softly. "You are family." Daniel froze at her words, then lowered his eyes, humbled. He had come to Zara as an outsider, a stranger in a city that barely noticed him. But now, standing in this small workshop, he felt something he had not felt in years: belonging. The aliens in the crowd began to nod, some even bowing their heads slightly. One of them spoke aloud. "Humans. Maybe they are not weak, maybe they are something else entirely," another added. "They see what we do not see, they hear what we do not hear." Slowly, respect began to grow where doubt once lived. Daniel stood quietly, looking at the toy, one last time. He knew his work was not perfect, the cracks still remained, but maybe that was the lesson. Nothing broken becomes flawless again. But with care, with love, it can still shine. And sometimes, the cracks make the light even more beautiful. He turned to leave, wiping his hands with a rag. But Alari ran to him, clutching the toy close with one arm. She hugged his leg tightly, her small voice trembling. "Don't go too far, Mr. Human," she said. "You are part of our family now." Daniel paused, his chest heavy with unexpected emotion. He placed his rough hand gently on her head. "I will not go far," he promised. The lesson was clear to everyone who witnessed that moment. Humans were not powerful because of strength or weapons. They were powerful because they cared, because they listened, because they never gave up. Where others saw only failure, a human saw another chance. Where others turned away, a human leaned closer. That was their gift, their ingenuity, their bond. As Daniel stepped outside into the streets of Zira, the crowd parted silently. Eyes followed him, no longer mocking but filled with quiet respect. He walked into the neon glow of the city, blending back into the crowd. But for Lyra and Alari, he would never be just another face. He was the man who gave back their light, the man who showed them that kindness can come from the most unexpected place. The toy hummed softly in Alari's arms as she whispered, "Papa is with me again." Lyra kissed her daughter's head, holding her close. "Yes, my star." And the human reminded us that even in a galaxy full of cold machines, there are still hearts that listen. And so the story of one human mechanic spread quietly through the city of Zera, a story that reminded everyone that sometimes the greatest strength is not in power, but in love, and in the simple truth that humans, fragile yet stubborn, can make the impossible possible.